Finding an apartment in the city is like trying to catch lightning in a bottle. You have to move fast when an opportunity strikes. That's how I ended up living with Sarah. We met on Craigslist, and with sky-high rental prices and limited options, I had to make a quick decision. Looking back, I wish I'd taken more time to get to know her. But when you're hunting for apartments in a competitive market, you don't always have that luxury. From the start, there was an undercurrent of tension. Even though I was a year younger, I made $73,000 while she earned $47,000. It wasn't something I bragged about. Honestly, I was underpaid for my position. But Sarah seemed to take it personally. She'd make these little comments, suggesting I didn't deserve my salary, despite the fact that I'd been working in my field since I was 16 and fast-tracked my bachelor's degree in 2 years. What Sarah didn't seem to understand was that my higher salary came with its own set of responsibilities. I had student loans to pay off, car payments to make, and a brutal commute that ate into my budget. Meanwhile, her parents had bought her car and paid for her college education. Still, she acted like her job was infinitely more demanding than mine, and that she was grossly underpaid. When we were apartment hunting, Sarah had this wish list that made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. Coming from the Midwest, she didn't grasp the reality of our city's rental market. She wanted in-unit laundry, separate bathrooms, a second-floor apartment, parking, a huge bedroom, tons of windows, and exposed brick walls, all for $1,200 per month. I had to bite my tongue to stop myself from telling her she was living in a fantasy world. By some miracle, we found a decent place. A first-floor 2-bedroom with a dishwasher, patio, gym, pool, and parking lot. The catch? To make it work with Sarah's budget, I had to pay $175 more than her each month. So while she paid $1,200, I was shelling out $1,375 for a slightly larger bedroom. Living with her quickly turned into a nightmare. The apartment looked like a tornado had swept through it daily. Her clothes were everywhere, dishes piled up in the sink, and don't even get me started on the bathroom situation. I discovered 3 months into our lease that she didn't even know how to use the dishwasher. I became the unofficial maid, constantly cleaning up after her, while she seemed oblivious to the mess she created. But the physical mess wasn't even the worst part. Sarah was emotionally exhausting. The moment I stepped into a room with her, she'd launch into endless monologues about everything and nothing. She'd rant about social issues she barely understood, misinterpret every minor interaction with guys as some grand romantic gesture, and constantly seek validation. Being around her was so draining that I started avoiding our apartment altogether, working late hours and scheduling workout classes just to minimize our interaction time. My friends stopped coming over because they couldn't handle her intensity. Any guy I brought home suddenly became her latest crush, despite her complete inexperience with relationships. She'd spend hours analyzing a simple hello from someone, turning it into an epic romance novel in her head. Sometimes, when she wouldn't stop talking, I'd feel tears welling up in my eyes from sheer exhaustion. I'd retreat to my room or escape to the patio, anything to get a moment's peace. At first, I tried to be gentle with my suggestions for improvement, but Sarah would immediately burst into tears and ask if I hated her. She'd tell me about how she was kicked out of her sorority in college and how people always leave her. It made me feel trapped. I couldn't be honest without triggering an emotional breakdown, so I started living like a ghost in my own home. My social life took a nosedive. I used to consider myself an extrovert, going on dates regularly and meeting friends often. But living with Sarah drained me so completely that I couldn't face additional human interaction. 1 hour at home with her used up all my social energy for the day. I found myself becoming depressed, my world shrinking to work and my bedroom, while she constantly demanded rides to places, emotional support about her job problems, and endless attention. As our lease neared its end, I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. I had an opportunity to move closer to my office in the city. The thought of moving closer to my office seemed like a dream come true. Sarah, initially, wanted us to continue living together, but her budget constraints made that impossible. The places she was looking at in the city would have required me to pay $2,400 while she paid $1,200, basically wanting me to subsidize her lifestyle even more than I already was. I had to put my foot down. After 2 months of apartment hunting and careful conversations, we agreed to live separately. I found a beautiful 4-bedroom place with some friends, just a 10-minute walk from my office. Everything was falling into place until we discovered a massive oversight. Our lease didn't end on July 1st as we thought, but on July 3rd. This mistake hit me like a truck. My new place required about $5,000 in move-in costs, which I could barely manage. Now I had to somehow come up with an extra $1,375 for the final month's rent at our old place. Sarah was thrilled about the extra time, but I was panicking. I tried to find a solution by suggesting we get a subletter for my room during that last month. Since we were next to a prestigious university, we had plenty of interested candidates: summer program students, visiting executives, and grad students. I carefully screened them and forwarded the promising ones to Sarah, but she rejected every single one for the most trivial reasons. Finally, I thought I'd struck gold. 2 sisters reached out. One was doing a summer medical program at the university, and the other was checking out grad schools. They offered to pay for the entire month even though they only needed the room for 3 weeks. It seemed perfect until Sarah's response came through. She demanded they pay more rent because, according to her, sharing a bathroom with 2 people instead of 1 was a downgrade in quality of life. She wanted to split the rent 3 ways, completely ignoring the fact that I'd been paying extra for 9 months just to accommodate her budget. The sisters couldn't afford what she was asking, and just like that, another potential solution slipped away. The frustration was overwhelming. For 9 months, I'd bent over backwards to accommodate her needs. I'd paid extra rent, cleaned up after her, given her rides, provided emotional support, and tolerated her endless talking. Now, when I needed one small favor, just 3 weeks of having an extra person use the shower, which they'd compensate for in utilities, she couldn't reciprocate. I found myself at a crossroads. I could either sublease my room against her wishes and risk a major confrontation, or somehow come up with the extra money I didn't have. The weight of 9 months of compromises and sacrifices was crushing me. I'd collectively paid $1,575 more than her for our apartment, only to have her treat it like her personal kingdom. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, my plans for the city apartment fell through. The startup company managing the shared house I was supposed to move into suddenly shut down their operations, literally the day before my planned move. With no other options and absolutely no desire to spend another minute living with Sarah, I moved back in with my parents. This turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Living at home helped me save money, and after a couple of months, I found an even better place in the city. Meanwhile, Sarah renewed her lease with Emma, an acquaintance from her college who was moving to our area. When Sarah lost her job, I even helped her land a new position through my industry connections. During this time, something unexpected happened. I matched with Jake on Tinder, a guy who used to work with Sarah at her previous company. I'd met him once at a company event I'd attended with her. When I mentioned the Tinder match to Sarah over coffee, our first meeting since I'd moved out, her reaction was intense. She immediately told me she'd had the biggest crush on Jake during her time at the company and insisted he was the one for her. She made me promise to message him and ask what he thought of her. I gave her a non-committal maybe and left it at that. I did message Jake, but not about Sarah. We started chatting and decided to go on a date. During this time, Sarah texted me almost daily, asking if I'd heard from him. When I finally told her we were going out, she exploded. She accused me of boyfriend stealing and gave me an ultimatum: choose between her friendship or him. It wasn't even a hard decision. After 9 months of walking on eggshells and dealing with her emotional vampirism, I was done pretending to be her friend. I chose Jake. Looking back now, 3 years later, I couldn't be happier with my choice. Jake and I lived together with our beautiful 1.5-year-old Australian shepherd. We've built an amazing life together. We have a tight-knit friend group, successful careers, and our families have become incredibly close. We even spend holidays together, switching between our families for Christmas and Thanksgiving. Sarah, predictably, blocked me on every possible platform, even Venmo. Through Jake's old coworkers, who still keep tabs on her through social media, I've heard she moved to Los Angeles and has been fired from 4 different companies since then. It seems her workplace issues weren't just bad luck after all. The whole experience taught me some valuable lessons. Sometimes, the worst situations lead you to the best outcomes. If I hadn't endured those 9 months with Sarah, I might never have met Jake. And while I felt guilty at times about how things ended, everyone who has ever known Sarah has validated my experience. They all saw the same unstable behavior I did. The most important lesson, though, was learning to trust my instincts. I knew from the start that living with Sarah wasn't right, but I ignored those feelings because of practical constraints. Now I know that no amount of convenience or cost savings is worth sacrificing your peace of mind and emotional well-being. It's funny how life works out sometimes. What started as a desperate Craigslist roommate search ended up leading me to my partner, our dog, and a life I love. And while I wouldn't wish a roommate like Sarah on anyone, I can't help but be grateful for how everything turned out. As for Sarah's ultimatum, well, I guess you could say I made the right choice. I chose happiness. Looking back at those challenging months, they now seem like a small price to pay for where I ended up. Jake and I often joke about the situation, especially when we're cuddled up with our dog in our shared home. Sometimes the worst decisions can lead to the best possible outcomes. And while I genuinely hope Sarah has found her own happiness somewhere in LA, I know I found mine by choosing to walk away from her drama and towards something real. People often ask me if I regret stealing Sarah's crush. I always laugh and say, you can't steal someone who was never yours. Jake and I were meant to find each other, even if it happened in an unconventional way. Sometimes the universe has a strange sense of humor, turning your worst living situation into the best thing that could have happened to you. And our dog? He's definitely the best roommate I've ever had.